ways, but
yeah,
I hope this is acceptable this time.
Let's try it. I mean, it's the first time I'm doing something like this. It's a bit like the European Song Contest. Hello to Cambridge. I hope it works, but then let's not spend too much further time. We all see your topic on the board here on pluralism. Why bother? So it's your floor, and if you like, you can introduce yourself quickly to the audience, which you will see when I turn the camera.
Okay. Right. So, can you all see me? Hi. Do I sit okay? Do you want me to position myself before I start?
No, that's fine. Very good.
Okay, fine. Hello everyone. My name is Ioana Negru. I like to think that I'm a pluralist economist, or at least I'm trying. At the moment I work at Daniel Ruskin University in Cambridge, and we have been trying here post-crisis to change the curricula, so introduce pluralism in various ways. As you probably know, I'm interested in economic methodology and philosophy of science and how this influences economics. And if you ask me what is my main kind of, if I have an agenda, something that I would quite like to do is to make economists more aware of what I call the Holy Trinity, which is ethics, pluralism, and methodology. I think this will make economics a healthier science and more rigorous. So I do apologize for not being able to be there and meet you personally. You can shut me up whenever you like. I have prepared some slides. The ideas are coming from various papers that I've done, but I'm thinking of writing a book about how to open up economics. So a lot of work in progress. So I would appreciate your comments. The other thing, I'm not sure what your debates have been so far. So I hope maybe I will go over some of the things that seem more general. So should I start, Arne?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Right, so I've been advised by Harold to mention when the slides are going through. So I'm looking now at the issues to explore. So how I organize my talk, of course, I don't need to tell you what pluralism is. And types of pluralism, of course, still an interesting debate. What kind of pluralism economics needs as a science, and what can we learn from other sciences, both natural and social sciences. So what type of pluralism we are trying to achieve, because there seems to be some slight consensus among main methodologists like Uskali-Maki and Sheila Dow and other economists or philosophers of science who are trying to come up with their own framework for pluralism, or anyway, philosophical underpinnings. And, of course, what are the barriers, briefly, in developing a more pluralistic form of economics? Trying, I suppose, at the end, to come up with the main justification. Why should we bother with pluralism? Because you see, what I think and what would I like to argue in this book is that one of the main issues with economics is there is a very homogeneous science. There are many issues that I can tell about economics, we can tell, but if we're not looking properly at the economics profession, the sociology behind it, how can we open up and what are the institutions that are blocking this, I'm not sure how we can have pluralism in teaching, in policy making, which seems to me it might make economics, bring more progress than many other things. Like, I'm thinking now of Tony Lawson, who says, well, if we get rid of all the mathematics in economics, we'll solve all the problems of economics, which I don't think is the case. I don't think we should put limits to the methods that economists use, but rather create the frame in which we can use more tolerance and openness. And maybe even this might mean a lot of progress for economics. Anyway, so this is kind of what I'm hinting, and I'd quite like to hear your thoughts. Okay, so I'm going now to the next slide. Science, not the truth. You might know more than me about him. I quite like this quote from Max Born. And I do show it a lot of the times to students. He says, I believe that ideas such as absolute correctness, precision, valid, truth are illusions that should never find a place in science. This attractive feature in our thinking seems to me the greatest blessing bestowed on us by modern science. The belief to be the possessor of one and only truth is the deepest root of all evil in the world. So I think it kind of, I like the fact that it's coming from physics as well, which I always try to show to the mainstream economists who, as you know, admire quite a lot physics. And I think it's a good platform for us to start to discuss about my own conception of pluralism and the fact that we don't know a lot about what truth is, and you know, economics seems to be a particularly interesting discipline because we are organized around schools of thought, and maybe it will always be organized like this. So how we go across this and how we promote conversation amongst groups, there will be a constant perennial problems. And I think that it's nothing wrong to have domination in one discipline. It probably exists in all the sciences. But the question is how much conversation there is amongst the groups and how healthy this debate and democracy that exists in the sciences, I think, is more problematic. So maybe questioning the mainstream is not the problem, but why we have it for so long and the change doesn't come about. So, of course, you know all these issues, I suppose. I'm going to the next slide, pluralist common meanings, and I'm not going to insist too much. Apart from preempting a few issues, I think mainstream economists particularly see red when we talk about pluralism, and I think a lot of the time is the actual meaning. And I think it's because they do not understand, there are a lot of misunderstandings about what pluralism is. And I think some of the issues, I suppose, which are not very clear, even in the new areas of, areas which are more accepted in the new mainstream economics, like behavioral economics, is the confusion, you know, what is the relation between pluralism and eclecticism, how that builds on the methodology of discipline, and you know, the issue of relativism, how do we go where anything goes? So, you know, all these things I know, but I think there is a lot of misunderstanding of pluralism because we do not know what that means. And a lot of the mainstream economists don't even bother to look in, you know, what would pluralism mean? In my opinion, in terms of economists who have tried to bring a framework, I personally think we have two serious frameworks, you know, with philosophical underpinnings in economics. And I'm not sure if I agree with either of them. One of my PhD students is actually working on developing his own, he's very, very serious, his own philosophical underpinnings, looking at John Stuart Mill and Deirdre McCloskey. So we see where he gets, he's just started. So I personally think that Sheila Dowd has some kind of, with her structured conception of pluralism, where she says that pluralism should have some kind of coherence and structure. You know, what is tenable for economics is a type of pluralism that implies coherent structure and some kind of methodological pluralism, but not pluralism at the level of ontology. So this is mostly what she's saying. But she also brings two issues in. I like her ideas very much and all her work. I think though her ideas come from post-Keynesianism, which is absolutely fine. But she frames pluralism around Kuhn, which I think his conception of incommensurability brings more confusion than clarity, and on open and closed systems. And I'm not sure if we need that necessarily in economics. I'm not sure. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Kuhn, and I can understand why she likes and appreciates his approach, because I think he has been the first philosopher of science to kind of break the norm of conservatism and look at things in a different way, although we know, you know, it's the best ever cited books in all social sciences. So I do like Kuhn a lot, and his conception and to explain how science works, you know, will be iconic forever. But I'm not convinced we need Kuhn and his conception of incommensurability as a basis of pluralism, nor do we need the conception of open and closed systems, which of course is very useful to distinguish in terms of macroeconomics, but also in terms of methodologies in mainstream and heterodox. Mainstream as closed, heterodox as open, as not critical realists versus post-Keynesians had a debate. But I just don't think this is, I don't think it puts forward what we actually need for economists and why we do not have pluralism in economics. So I think further work has to be done in the sociology of the profession, which doesn't explain everything that is going on. The other conception is Rob Garnett. Rob Garnett, who I think has tried to look at putting together data in a framework of, he's a classical liberal working in the tradition of Hayek. And I think, of course, any conception of pluralism in a science must be somehow based on some kind of conception of academic freedom. So I do understand that, liberty and freedom, whatever we mean by it, it has to somehow underpin pluralism. But I think he tries to combine Amartya Sen with David McCloskey, and I'm not convinced that his framework, again, is very promising. And all this discussion of strategic pluralism, I just do not like. I don't find it useful. A lot of the heterodox economists are, maybe rightly, I'm not saying that's not the case, probably that's the case, are somehow accused that we advance some kind of conception of pluralism that is strategic, and actually we're not very open ourselves, but we just want to take over from the mainstream, etc. But then what does it mean strategic? All scientists are strategic. We all have an agenda. Mainstream is strategic as well. So I'm not sure why this is a scene. We all have objectives and agenda. So I'm not sure I understand the logic of the argument. But anyway, so these are, as far as I know, the only two, Tony Lawson, for instance, has done a lot of contributions for heterodox economics, but doesn't use too much pluralism. He just has a defense in his latest book, but he's not particularly interested in that. Anyway, so moving on to the next one, to forms and types of pluralism. And again, maybe you want to, Anna can give me a sign when to stop, kind of the last 5 minutes, so I don't ramble, or whenever. Okay.
No, you have a quarter of an hour at least.
Okay, no, so I'm going then into forms and types of pluralism, and one of the interesting, obviously debates in philosophy, which I haven't looked properly at, of course, is conceptions of truth and how that relates to pluralism. In economics, very few economists actually talk about the search of truth, and you have just very few, except like Hayek or Knight, who relate truth to knowledge and uncertainty. But it's still something that is interesting there. And of course, I think the discussion in the realm of methodology, whereas amongst more reformist or more conservative methodologies, how I like to see them, has been around what form of pluralism economists need. And for me, if I would like to take, the consensus that we don't want any ontological pluralism. Because that goes too far, that means postmodernism, fragmentation, we don't want anything of such. And I think various economists have taken various positions around methodological pluralism or epistemic pluralism. I think these are two important forms. For me, I don't understand, for instance, Tony's position, and I'm not picking up on him. I'm in his group, and we meet very regularly. I'm just trying to say that he seems to me that he sees mathematics as the big enemy in economics, and I think we shouldn't limit the type of methods. I think actually economy should be more open to, and this is something that heterodox economists have stressed for a long time, and various other critiques of economics, that we should look at various methods used in natural and social sciences, because a lot of the methods do not work. Their evidence is limited, and because of that, we need to bring more types of evidence to understand the complexity of the economic world. And then, of course, epistemic pluralism, because we want to kind of look into various ways to accumulate knowledge. So for me, those would be very, very, very important, something to stress about. And just as of course, then, if we go on to the next slide, I'm just now going through the way that I see the debate in pluralism for the moment, although I think lately the debates ever moved a lot. I think the latest publication probably is, there was a special issue a year ago, I think, organized around Fred Lee, which I think Fred Lee, of course, is interested in pluralism, but he doesn't have, per se, a philosophical kind of or scientific framework for pluralism, but he talks that economy is some kind of form of intellectual pluralism. And Andrew Meerman and Rob Garnett discuss about this, but of course this is not enough. Again, this is not very clear. So at the moment I think the discussions on pluralism and economics are a bit stagnating. But of course they are brought to the fore by all the post-crisis movements and everything that happens. And I must say, before I go on to discuss the next slide, that I'm very happy, I'm not sure if you've seen, The Guardian has published in the last 2 months a lot of letters about all the movement of students in UK about introducing more pluralism in the economics curricula. So, there is now a Cambridge Society for Economic Pluralism done by students. There is a whole group of reformers at LSE, Manchester, and so on, that all complained in the media in UK about the lack of pluralism and the state of economics. So it's very promising because we can criticize as much as we want. We can come up with new ideas, but I think when students are pushing the agenda, we might have a chance to make something to the level of education that might change the way that economists see the world and maybe have more responsibility towards various issues. So, of course, the next slide is on plurality, and I looked at Maki, and it comes from probably the best book that exists at the moment, 1997, edited by Salanti and Screpanti, where the methodologists came together to talk about what pluralism is. And there he makes a distinction between pluralism and plurality and shows actually all this variety of meanings of plurality, and the fact that in economics we might say that we had plurality, but I'm not convinced that we had ever pluralism in the sense of tolerance amongst ideas. Maybe with very short, maybe interwar period and so on. It all depends on the evidence that we bring and how we defend pluralism. So just a few more. I'm going to the next one. What type of pluralism are we trying to achieve? Is that the first one, I think? The next one? I think there seems to be, I'm now repeating a little bit myself and I don't want to, maybe we should leave more time to discuss and try to conclude. I said this, that, we have to be careful about relativism and, all these pluralism in the context of Kuhnian incommensurability, which I said already. And if I go on to the next one, I'm kind of trying to comment that what we need, so we are, what type of pluralism are we trying to achieve? Point number 2, I'm kind of saying that we do need some kind of pluralism, that we have to somehow imply some kind of progress and structure, but keep the plurality that we have and allow some kind of criticism and conversation between economists, which I think is kind of missing at the moment. And I'm not convinced whether the problems of economics can actually be solved without somehow mainstream and heterodox coming together to, do we need a professional code of practice to introduce more responsibility amongst economists? Do we need more openness in what way? What are the barriers and so on? Anyway, then I'm going to, this is a paper that, of course, I can send to all of you if you're interested. If you don't know, I think it's online though. I've written a paper in 2008 on pluralism and fragmentation, and it seems more like the paper is what we're trying to advance there is some kind of a reflexive conception of pluralism that allows to see similarities between various theories and methods and so on, but thinking about ontology. Maybe it is some kind of critical realist in our vision. But so what the paper is about is trying to say that pluralism cannot exist without criticism, and we are just worried about the fragmentation that exists in economics and in science without this kind of issues of conversation. But again, I don't want to repeat myself. Okay, so I'm going to move on a bit quicker here towards the end. So what kind of implications do I think there are for this reflexive form of pluralism? So what I think is this will enable to see where differences, amongst economists are presupposed, held, and defended, why differences in methodology might arise or presuppose in the social realm. So we think that, if we also think about ontology, this might help economists understand where the differences are coming, which probably is quite basic. Whether the oppositions are less fundamental and how can conflict these views or, to uncover differences in various policies might be. I'm not sure if you agree with me at all here. And then, of course, I get towards the end, what are some of the barriers? And I'm sure here I'm not saying anything new. So I suppose what I'm trying to do at the moment is think about my own philosophical underpinnings for a framework and how, I don't think it's feasible to ask, well, it's feasible to have pluralism in economics. We have to find a way in which slowly the discipline can become more rigorous and healthy and where the problems are lying. And then, of course, we go back to education, which I think is important, and all these personal skills which sometimes students expose, such as lack of intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness, so, particular type of economic students. But then, of course, we have some barriers in the discipline. So, of course, we still have a schism. So there is this kind of constant thing between modelers and non-modelers, even in areas such as heterodox economics. You take complexity economics. So we say that complexity economics is a new area and draws a lot on other sciences and very interdisciplinary. But a lot of the economists there still try to do regression. But of course, regression is completely incompatible with complexity in the sense that we want to presuppose that we have nonlinearity and we want to look at human beings, in terms of networks and so on. So an agent-based modeling, it's completely against all these issues. Of course, we have political issues. Fred Lee talks a lot about rankings of heterodox journals, the REF in UK and so on. Heterodoxy not taken seriously anymore, homogeneity, and I suppose maybe this crisis, that's what I think the two. Maybe I like to think that it's easier in a way with all these post-crisis movements. There may be a change in education policy making might bring to the fore what heterodoxy has to offer and so on. And of course, maybe more methodological fluids. I think three things that maybe are easier to implement slowly somehow in the discipline and so on. And I kind of finish, my last slide is why bother with pluralism. But of course, in this project that I have, I'm at the moment looking, and I think one strong argument that we can put forward is that most of the disciplines are pluralistic in a way. I mean, of course, it has to be seen and why. I mean, I'm looking at the moment, I find two interesting disciplines that maybe where economists can have a look. One is physics. Physics have moved on. In physics, there are discussions about pluralism, but in economics, there are not. And then you have, of course, sociology, which I think the basis of the discipline are much more pluralistic, and they seem more open to our debates about it, even than philosophers. So maybe two interesting disciplines where we can learn from how debates exist and so on are these two. So I'm thinking of looking more in depth about these two disciplines and what can economists learn from them. So why bother with pluralism? Why economy should look at pluralism? Well, of course, knowledge of the world is limited and incomplete. Maybe economy should be more modest and think that, confirmationism is an illusion. We all know this. And it's funny that positivism has been so much criticized in science and economists haven't moved on at all. They don't seem to understand that we have a complex and open nature of reality, and how do we go with that? And of course, one type of economics doesn't apply to all values and institutions and to all systems. So what about history, culture, and so on? And of course, the other thing which is very important, because open-mindedness and when economics has become a dogma as it is right now, it seems to me, as the crisis show, we have somehow failed. Even if we see mainstream economics as a quest for prediction and exact science, we kind of failed on those counts too. So this dogma hasn't gone anywhere useful. Anyway, I will stop here and I will welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Iona, and we really appreciate that you took your time talking half an hour to the computer. I know this must be terribly somehow, but we at least heard you well, and as there is no discussant for you set in the program, and is there no one immediately raising their hands? Maybe I can start asking you something or telling you a little story, so to say. We only 2 or 3 weeks ago had a conference organized by the Real World Economic students in Hamburg, and they invited a colleague, a rather orthodox, I would judge, colleague, to talk on pluralism in economics. And her approach was, or at the end, her conclusion rather was that she doesn't understand all the fuss about pluralism because at any time, her argument was, there is a variety of theories competing with each other. So we always have, we always had, we always have, and we always will have pluralism in economics, so to say. So today, as we have neo-Keynesian theories and we have new classical theories, and we have behavioral economics, and we have institutional economics. So there is pluralism in economic methodology as well as in epistemological approaches. So what's all the fuss? How would you respond to that conclusion of hers, given to the students of real-world economics who were asking probably for something different? I think their expectations were to get a different answer. What would be your response to that?
Okay. Well, because we still have, I will just make a digression, just to say a few things. I mean, some of the discussions that are going on in the Heterodox Economic Society in UK, because I'm part of the committee. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are 2 interesting projects going on. But I will go to Soros. You probably all have heard of INET, Institute of New Economic Thinking, and Soros being trying to be progressive and one of the few who are trying to fund heterodox projects. The problem is that a lot of conservative, more mainstream economists have infiltrated that. And the funny thing is this: they just launched a project, INET Core. It is online. And it on the 11th, it was launched at the Treasury in UK with all the government officials and so on. And there were a lot of prominent people there involved into teaching and training, like Wendy Carrick from UCL, University College London, Perry Merling from INET, Bob Johnson, Dan Coyle, who has written a lot on how to introduce pluralism in teaching and so on. But all the discussion was about how do we have a new mainstream. So their conception was not about pluralism, and Soros is funding this. And we were all shocked about not just what we heard, but how on earth can Soros fund something like this, and what is the change that will come? And this was published in The Guardian, is discussed by all the students who want reform, so exactly like you're saying. And I've seen Dan Cole in Cambridge 2 weeks ago, and they asked her, okay, so what is the vision? So how do we introduce pluralism in courses? Where are all these methodologies coming to? And she had nothing to say. So there are some people, I think, talking about change doesn't mean they actually mean change. It's an interesting choice of word. What's the fuss? I think it's a bit tough. I think pluralism in any science. I mean, then we can ask, why then do we have pluralism in other sciences like physics and so on? And even in mathematics. Victor McCloskey, as late as 1980s, cites some interesting philosophy of science. I don't have the name right now, but I can send an email with the public. I think it's one of her rhetoric articles in a Journal of Economic Literature in 1984, I think. And where, philosophers of the method in mathematics and so on, they were discussing about all this illusion of rigor in mathematics. And, I'm sure you know much more than I do on this, because I'm just a baby at the moment in philosophy of science, but I didn't have the time to follow that and go and read the whole book of this philosopher of mathematics. So, but mainstream economists think that we do have some kind of science going on. And I think the crisis has showed that the basis of economics and science are very shaky and actually is not that serious as a foundation. So what is the fuss? Well, I do think, again, this might be a distinction for the head, they will see it as just a method of, a question of distinction. I don't think that we have ever had pluralism, proper pluralism in economics. We do have a pluralistic theory, that is true, and that is very healthy. Something that I like about economists, and it should be a competition of ideas. And because economics is such a pragmatic science, maybe one thing to judge is to look of how good we are to offer solutions to the problems of the day. You know, I don't know. Probably the discussion is deeper than that. It should be more fundamental. But this is definitely one criteria that economists should look at. She doesn't understand what the fuss is. I don't know what else to add. I do think that we don't have pluralism, and why is important, because we have to change. I think it's intellectually dodgy to claim that you go in front of the students and say, we are presenting you just this view of the world, when there are so many alternative views. I think this is the point the students are making. So, you know, they're not prepared for the world. So we are presenting them a view which we know it doesn't explain the world and the reality and is flawed and so on, without telling them that is the case. But we claim that this is the truth about what economics is like. So I think it's quite intellectually dodgy. You know, in a way that we don't allow contestation to work, and I don't know. Does it respond a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah. My point I was probably hinting to is maybe a distinction between variation and plurality. I mean, I would argue there's a lot of variation within the orthodox paradigm, but at the end they all stick to the same heuristic devices, and probably not to all the same axioms, but either the same heuristic devices or they are methodologically very similar. So, but they're all, in that sense, it's all one paradigm, but they don't allow for anything outside of this paradigm. They allow for a bit of dissenters within the paradigm, but nothing outside the paradigm. And only having at least two or more paradigms would be pluralistic. And actually, she has never heard of anything outside the paradigm. She thought, Marxism or Marxist theories, that was all history of economic thought to her, not something that should be dealt with today.
May I just say something interesting here? I'm not sure how much you know about UK, but it's very, very brief. It's talking about history of economic thought. In UK, the way that, maybe all of you, that we have this kind of, in case of, I'm not sure if it will exist in the future, but this year was another research excellence framework exercise, where heterodox economists always had problems because our journals are less ranked than the mainstream. So there is this kind of list where we have to publish, which you all do, but in any case important because they rank the value of the department based on the number of stars. And each member of staff have to go with 4 publications. And, it takes a year, then we get the results and so on. But this has driven a lot of discrimination against heterodox scholars. So how they found out, this is important because, and this is one of my problems that I want to write about, which probably brings down heterodoxy. I'm not sure everywhere, but in UK for sure. I think we are seen as an ideological bunch, which are not doing serious economics. And partly in UK is because then heterodox economists found a way to exist in doing political economy, right? So, but the mainstream has used this against us, saying, let them do political economy, this is no real economics. So, one of the things that I think strategically for economists would be to go beyond this political economy, which is a bit confusing because it goes back to Adam Smith and so on, and it doesn't reflect, all this new economic thinking. Maybe we should defend heterodox economics and be clear that we mean, serious business, and we are economists, and, defend the identity. So maybe there is something there, and kind of show that we have policy solutions, not just ideological claims like the Marxists. So I think this probably has brought down heterodoxy a little bit. I suspect, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Let's open the discussion now to the floor. No?
Yes.
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Well, I have one thing. It has to do with like when I look at the economy right now, I have the feeling almost like economists, they are like soldiers in a war, and it depends on which side they're standing. Kind of, if they're standing on the side of the rich people or the poor people. I mean, of course, like I say, it very simple. And one person once told me, I asked like a clever guy, and I asked him, how do you deal with evil people? And he said, if you play fair in an unfair game, you're definitely going to lose. And so in that sense, I feel like all the pluralism thing you're talking about is great for a fair game, but it's not so nice probably in a war.
So are you saying that, yeah, I suppose what you're saying is that institutions in the discipline need to change. Is that the truth? Do you want me to respond to each question, or should I gather some? What do you like to do?
No, that's fine. You can respond. Okay.
So are you saying that the game that exists now in economics is not fair? Is that true? In terms of the rules of engagement?
No, I say that it's probably naive to be pluralistic. Like to say to stress the pluralism is a very naive thing in many respects. Like you showed it in your slides as well. Like there's the whole relativistic side that usually like if I say it very simple, the evil people will always say, well, but evilness is one opinion among many. No. And so if you are on the side of the weaker people, and usually also on the weaker side and of the poor people, it's very hard to have a pluralistic view. That's what I say, and probably very destructive to your own cause. At the same time, of course, I see the problem in what I say right now, because like who is the good and who is the bad? Of course, that's always it gets like there's a lot of ideology coming in, but right now, still like not all the opinions being said are equal. I think in the debate, kind of in the like economic debate, and therefore I have my problem with pluralism because I see it as an unfair game being played.
You're absolutely right. That's what I'm trying to be realistic. I know I'm probably very idealistic. You're absolutely right. There is some kind of naivety there whenever we talk about pluralism. I mean, you must, yes, we want probably all a better world, difficult to change the world. But I think that the post-crisis are giving us a little bit more conditions, because students are discontent, to make some changes in education. And that means that, even the number, the balance, students will be more aware of competing perspectives, and that we don't have just one truth. We'll realize that, there are limitations in each perspective, and they will have to compare them. So there are some critical skills there which might help. The other thing that I thought is, again, policy making. I mean, it's worth the battle, because you take, for instance, I'll give an example. You take Eastern Europe. I'm in a discussion with some colleagues in Romania, and in Eastern Europe, to make a little bit of a heterodox network, because in policy making there's a bit of a difference, but it's kind of the same. So there's not enough pluralism in policy making. The policy makers are not informed by their advisors about various solutions and so on, from various reasons. But the issue is that you take Eastern Europe and all their bias against Marxism and left and so on, which of course is understandable because of the communist history. And what you find there is some kind of neo-Keynesian, which is very mainstream, and also just Austrian economics, which is, I quite like, and I write about Austrian economists, but that's not pluralism enough. But it's also unbiased, in the way that people vote. It shows that, they will need a lot of time to recover to trust the left, for a while. But what I'm saying is that maybe this can be done. The other thing that it comes with a crisis, which starts from George DeMartino's work, and again we have here a little bit of a nice project. I think a very useful institution it will be, and what he's trying to promote, a professional code of practice for economists, ethical one. So I'm not sure what they will contain. There are discussions, even in the American Economic Association, but things are slowly moving. I'm not sure if this will ever happen, but this I can see it as a very useful institution, because it might prevent a lot of conflict of interests, bad advising of policymakers, so lack of ethics of economists in, kind of not making sure that limitations of the models that are used by central banks are very, very faulty and so on. So I think that's something, again, that is not that impossible to achieve. So little things that might just change the way that we are informed about economics and the different perspective there is in different solutions that we give to the world. And even that might bring some, I don't know, but if we don't try, I don't know. So that will be my answer. And the other very quick thing, because I don't want to block the discussion and constantly talk, but you might find this interesting. I just finished a paper, and I think even Arne he'll be interested in this because he's a macroeconomist as well. Is on macroeconomic crisis and the policy. And what we found in there, and this kind of brought me because you were saying about rich and evil, and rich and poor people, and my thought went to the Eurozone crisis. And this insistence with austerity. And as you know, a lot of the heterodox economists are criticizing austerity, because it's not very useful for the economy, especially for the pigs economies and so on. And what we found in the paper is something interesting. There are just only 2 papers coming from the mainstream which are bringing evidence for austerity. And what we found is that if you take UK, for instance, but it's same for the Eurozone, there was 1 year only, 2009-10, when we had some kind of Keynesian stimulus. And then all the policymakers pushed for this treasury view, cut, austerity, right? But the only evidence that exists, there are 2 papers, which one of them is very, very dodgy, very, very unethical in terms of the way data is, and I would like you to go and read because I can send you the dates. It's Reinhard and Rogoff, who are trying to argue, and actually they were caught, there are public debates about it, so that's one of the 2. And the other one is Alesina. Alesina is used in the policy-making debate in the Eurozone. So, but then how do you explain the policymakers' attachment to pursue policy that we don't even have evidence? That was the only point that we wanted to make, right? I don't know what others will understand from the paper, but we want to say, okay, so we have an insistence, a fixation with some kind of policy where there is not strong evidence that actually is better for the economy. Anyway, we need to try things, but I thought that was interesting to mention. I don't know. But again, it's about the fair game in policy making. Anyway.
Some further questions? No? Well, I would have some more questions, trying to be again realistic. Is pluralism a viable concept in a ontologically unified world? Let's put it that way. Or put it differently, we are living in a capitalistic world, and is a science based on a paradigm that is critical on capitalism really be able to gain reputation in such an environment? Or isn't there a bias for paradigms that rather argue in favor of the institutions that are existing?
Okay,
and probably a second question, a bit different question. Would not, well, it's maybe related to that, actually, it's maybe related to that. Would not pluralism impair somehow the reputation of economics as a serious science? Was not that one of the reasons, so to say, to professionalize economics in a way to become a more monistic science, simply to make it more reputational and to gain more influence for the economist in policy advice and the like? Would not all that be lost if we would open it up for not anything goes, but at least for a variety of paradigms where the one hand says this and the other hand says that?
Right, very tough questions, right? I'm not sure if I have an answer to these. But okay, so I like this because you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a question of reality and what we can do. Okay, so what are we saying? I suppose that there is in economics some kind of tendency to preserve the status quo. Is that true?
Exactly, yes.
And I suppose it's the same in all the sciences. But this is what Kuhn was saying, that the paradigm defends itself in a way. So it's so strong in economics that there are no ways how to. Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe one of the factors is that I'm just thinking of Fukuyama and the end of history and all that maybe because mainstream economics is defending capitalism, there is this, tendency to preserve that. I'm not sure that there is always a strong tendency towards preserving the paradigm. Maybe that's why I want to look more into the sociology of the profession, and I have this kind of, why are mainstream economists so obsessed with mathematics and so against any intellectual exercise? Because they are. All my colleagues, so do I have an answer? I'm not sure. I agree with you, there is, but I'm not sure. Maybe we can discuss this so I can elaborate a little bit more. And on the second one, I agree. I mean, I suppose, I don't think it will impair on the reputation. I mean, do we have a reputation of being a science? I mean, probably has been tarnished by the crisis, right? It seems like we are very dilettante because we don't agree on policy solutions or what have been the causes, why we have failed to predict, and so on. Do you think that maybe you're right? I don't know. There's something that I will need to think about more. Maybe it will be worthwhile to have a survey amongst the mainstream economists to ask them, do you think, maybe that's their perception? I don't know. I think the heterodox will say no. I'm not sure what the mainstream will answer to that. The open-minded ones probably no, but yeah, I'm not sure what else to do. Maybe you can challenge me a bit more so I can position with a more detailed answer here.
To make my point clear, I'm not against pluralism, obviously. But if there are some barriers to pluralism from within the science, we would have to find, we would have to address it and find ways how to counteract these barriers. And I'm afraid there are quite strong barriers to make the science more pluralistic. And in terms of the theory of knowledge or so, and theory of science, maybe Kuhn, I'm not quite sure if Kuhn is really the right and the best to place it on. Maybe Lakatos is more interesting in his he describes the competition of research. What's the paradigms or research programs exactly? Or Feierabend, of course, who is favoring anything goes, which does not mean anything goes, but it means there should be a plurality of competing approaches, at least in the social science, probably in all science, but at least in the social science, because we never know.
Yes, I mean, the reason why this is a Georgian profession, it has been a little bit done by Bob Coates in the 1970s and 80s. But I think nobody has looked, what is the background of mainstream economists? Where are they coming from? What is their, are they coming from middle class? I don't know. I'm wondering whether their background, you probably know, but my co-author has written a paper which I disagree, but you might be interested to go and read. It has been in 2008 or 9, I don't remember, in Cambridge Journal of Economics. Vinka Bigo for this particular paper, and she argues that she tried to look into psychoanalysis to define the attachment of mainstream economists to mathematics. But I don't think that that's correct, because also heterodox economists, there is no, as you know, no agreement amongst heterodox economists whether we shouldn't use mathematics or not. And most of the paradigms, apart from Austrians, they all use mathematics, post-Keynesians and so on, right? And still modeling and so on. And as I said, we shouldn't rule that out. So I disagree. But I think it would be very interesting to make a survey. And even to know, okay, who are these people? Where they come from? Why this attachment? I have, for instance, mainstream colleagues. Some of them are quite nice, but then you say, well, I'm a straightforward mainstream. I have never read Keynes, but it's not an informed decision, and they don't seem to be interested to read anything. So this kind of lack of intellectual seems to be quite a pervasive. They just don't want to look into Keynes or Hayek. It seems like almost this fear of being wrong. But I think a lot of them are just because they've been educated like this, and they're just not bothered to contest. So maybe we need to look about who are these people. I don't know. I'm not sure. But maybe it might bring some interesting results. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's one more question.
Yeah. It's just, I think there's one more thing is that makes like economy a different science from other sciences. is that you can be very close to the ruling class, and probably it's not so much even the background of the different like people working there, but it's very nice to be close to the kings, you know, and and to be in favor of them, and that instinct is very deep within us, like all basically. So I think that makes it all of that difficult.
Okay, so I think I'm not sure if I understand the whole. I mean, what do you mean close the? I mean, in favor of the power, where power is. Is that what you're trying to say? That somehow, you know, being mainstream brings career, power, you know, publishing in better ranked journals.
I mean both. Sorry, I mean both. Like it doesn't matter if you for the poor people or for the rich people, but it's all about money. Like all of them, like that science is directly about money, and therefore it's directly about what people have and what they don't have, and like what dreams they can realize and what dreams they cannot realize, and it's about power a lot. At least people imagine that, and so that makes it complicated. Like probably more complicated than if you say in mathematics. Probably it's easier to be pluralistic. You know what I mean? Or in I don't know what. Physics, because it's a kind of a thing of the past, slightly.
Okay, so but would you have, you know, I mean, all of you, would you think that is anything which is more realistic from what I said that is worth pursuing, or something that economists can do? I mean, is my intuition right that maybe a more openness towards, I don't know, methods from other sciences might bring more informed perspective? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Will it worth to look into physics and sociology as solutions for economists and how they interact? I don't know. But maybe you will be, yes, if time is running out, maybe you can send me some thoughts.
It would be probably quite interesting to compare sociology and economics, why the one is a rather monistic science while the other seems not to be so monistic, at least. And one answer could be that the one is closer to power than the other. I'm not quite sure. Or at least a bit more broadly, probably one could say that at least in the economic science there are incentives to be not too pluralistic or to be close to power or whatever. And if we want to open it up, we have to change the incentive structure, which is very difficult, I would think, but don't want to be too pessimistic.
Okay, no, I think it's a good idea.
Like, I mean, this research assessment exercise in the UK or whatever it's called now, I mean, this is a very strong incentive not to be too pluralistic or to be too heterodox. We don't have such structured incentives in Germany yet, but still the situation is almost the same because it's just a bit more informal. It's not that formal as it is in the UK, but it's more informal, a bit more hidden, but the same incentive structure, so to say. And unless we change that, it might be difficult from within the science itself.
Sure. Okay, no, it's interesting. I will think about this. Thank you.
Okay. And anyway, time has run out. So thank you very, very much, Jonna. Next time, hopefully you will be here then
I will promise. I apologize.
In Linz, Austria. And so what all we can say is 12 points from Linz, Austria.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good conference remaining.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That worked much better than one could have expected, huh? Great. Thank you very much. So the session is finished, is closed, or I can close the session by now, and we meet again at 7 o'clock at the, what was it again? Locomotive, of course.